Welcome to Frankly Speaking. My name is Frank Emiro. I'm sure some of you know me. And I'm honored to be sitting with someone that is now the Speaker of the New Hampshire House. So hello, Mr. Speaker, Shawn
Hello, Frank.
Jasper. Thank you. I understand the election wasn't so easy.
No, it certainly was a challenging day, to say the very least.
Well, that's good. And you got into it. You won. I don't remember the number of the votes, but when I was a rep and you were a rep only, we did have lots of conversations. We discussed lots of things. And I was very surprised people didn't know the real Shawn Jasper, that Shawn deals with issues just like I do. And I know I aggravate a lot of people, but I do. But you got to deal with facts, not what you think you know. And there was a state rep a few years ago when I was in. I told him there's 3 types of people on the entire planet. Everything is 1, 2, 3, red, green, yellow, him, her, child. I said, you can go 4 and 5, but it gets lost. So there's those that say, leave me alone, I don't care to know. Then there's those that think they know, and then there's the ones that know what they think. The dangerous one of the 3 is the ones that think they know, because they don't deal with facts. The ones that know what they think will dig, let's say, from here to China, don't get an answer, back up, go to Italy or France. And that's how I feel. So I'm very proud that you got elected. And how do you like it so far? I mean, it's got to be pressure, pressure, pressure.
Well, you know, it's not as much pressure as I thought. Primarily, I think, because I've really assembled a great team, and I brought some really good people along with me.
Good.
And so they're doing just a fantastic job. So we're handling the load together, really doing a good job of getting everything done. So I love the job. I'm generally there 3 days a week. I try to get there by 8:15 in the morning, and most nights I don't get out of there till 5:30 or 6. And we get a lot done, meet with a lot of people, but you know, just there are so many good people that I have on board that, you know, it's just making the job easy and very enjoyable.
Well, that's good. I know I watched on the video. I watched from the house, and I saw you speaking. I guess it was the first session. And I thought it was excellent. And I saw there were, in the front row, there were some Democrats and Republicans. And I thought that was just wonderful, that it was a good thing that people, no matter what party, will work together on behalf of the citizens, especially of this state. And I was very proud of that, really.
Well, you know, the one thing that I think, when you get beyond the politics, and I'm a politician on some levels, but I prefer to think of myself as a public servant. And when you get into the issue of what's good for the state of New Hampshire and what do we want for the state of New Hampshire, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all really want the same thing.
Exactly.
We want a good economy. We want good education. We want good infrastructure so that our economy can grow. We want the same things. Where we disagree is, how do we get there? And if you can agree on the fact that you want what's best for the state of New Hampshire, and you're not demonizing each other, it's a lot easier to find the solutions that are right for New Hampshire, rather than just trying to point fingers and call names. And we've seen too much of that. And I really think that the people in New Hampshire are tired of that. And,
I agree with you.
And that's what we're trying to do. So right now the relationships are great. They're working well on the committee levels right now. And you know, we've stayed with the intermingling. When I came in as a freshman, now I've been in and out of the House for 30 years.
Wow.
I was 25 when I first got elected to the House. At that time I was also chairing the Hudson Board of Selectmen.
So you have experience and knowledge.
Yes.
That's good.
And I came in intermingled, and what I didn't realize at the time is we had a supermajority back in '85. We had about 295 members of the House, but we hadn't picked up a huge number because we already had a really good-sized majority. Mm-hmm. And I was intermingled. I was sitting in the middle of the section, and I was all surrounded by Democrats. I didn't even know we had a supermajority because there were so many Democrats sitting around me, but it was a lot of fun.
Right.
Because we got to exchange ideas, we got to joke with each other, you know, and it made for a much better relationship. When you go all Republicans on one side of the House and all Democrats on the other, you get into the catcalls and you get into that mentality where it's us against them.
Exactly.
And it really shouldn't be. It should be all of us for the people of New Hampshire.
Right. I went to an event when I was first elected in 2008, and a friend of mine said, this is Representative Frank Emiro, you know. So this guy comes up after, he says, oh, so you're a politician? I said, no. He says, what do you mean? You're a state rep? I said, that's right, I'm a state rep. He says, but you're a politician. I said, no, I'm an elected official. He says, what's the difference? So I said, well, let's pick a task here. There's a group of ladies in front of us. These ladies come up and you say, where are you on abortion? You say, where are you? They say, oh, I'm for it. Oh, I'm for it. You go over here, this lady says, I'm against it. Well, I'm against it. That's a politician. Elected official is going to say, look, this is how I feel about this, and I'm sure you would feel the same way, and anybody listening or watching. God forbid your mother, your wife, your daughter, or someone in your family got raped. How can you tell that person you must have that child? If that's your religion of faith, then that's fine with me. You believe that. But it should not be anything to do with government. So I tell people I deal with facts. I don't like playing games. If I don't know, I'm going to start digging. Like you know, and I personally know you from my experience in the House. You asked me a couple of questions on something I was doing or something, and I asked you a couple of, and we got the results. And that's what counts. You cannot just go with a group that says, this is the group, this group says we should only do A, not B. Well, let's work between A and B if it's the right thing on behalf of the citizens that we represent. So that's why I look at you as an elected official, and Al, who's doing the programming with us, we did a flag program here, and he says, and former politician, and I went so like, oh, geez, you know, like that, you know. So, and I get a kick out of it. But to me, politicians did mean something good in its day. Today, too many people are afraid to vote. Good Democrats and Republicans back off. They become independents. They don't trust anything. And what I adore is that now you're the speaker and you work with people. And I don't care what their party. They can be extreme right, extreme left. You're going to work with them. If they don't want to work with you, then they shouldn't go and attack you. They should understand this is the speaker. Let's see what we can get done in behalf of the people that elected us. And then they know how to speak at a group party or a meeting and say, well, I spoke with the speaker or the speaker this or the majority leader or the Senate or the governor or my committee. And these are some of the answers. That's what you're supposed to do. And that's just the way I deal with it. So I like that you made it. And there were probably some good candidates there. But, you know, I remember sometimes when I was in the State House, and I'm sure you remember, and you don't have to answer this, I'll answer it. Somebody would be called Representative so-and-so. He or she would walk down, and everybody, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, would go, ugh, and you'd hear the whole roar through the whole house. Yeah. So it's not easy. So the people that vote for the candidates really don't understand. My issue has been with the state of New Hampshire is we have 400 state reps. Okay, nice. But we only have 24 state senators. Why not someday maybe go from 24 state senators to 48 state reps? Why do we need 400 opinions when these people should be doing things? And I guess it's good the way it was set up originally, but I don't know.
Well, when it was set up originally, it wasn't set up with 400. There were really very few because it was population-based.
Exactly.
And so I don't remember what the numbers were, but they were very low to start with. And it just grew and grew, and it grew until the 1940s. I think we got up to 425.
Right, it did go over.
Yeah, and that was, I think the limitation was the hall doesn't handle that. I mean, we're like sardines in there at 400.
Oh, yeah.
And I think one of the issues of lowering it is, of course, there's a great deal of pride in us being the third largest legislative body in the English-speaking world after
That's right.
British Parliament and
Congress
and in the U.S. House. But the other thing is, to vote for an amendment to send to the people to reduce the size of the House would mean that some of us would feel we were actually voting ourselves out of office.
Right.
Because we wouldn't know who, say we went down to a more reasonable number of 200, which would still be a very large House, half of us would be gone.
Exactly.
And the senators don't like to dilute their influence, because generally it's been a proposal to decrease the size of the House but bring the Senate up to like 48. But they don't like that because then their power is diluted. So
right.
I think we're stuck where we are.
Yeah.
You know, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it does give us just such an incredible birth of experience in the House. I mean, there's people from all walks of life, all socioeconomic ranges. You know, there's a woman, this to me is a fascinating story, and she just told it to me last week. She's a Democrat out of Nashua. She was born in India.
Wow.
And she's in the House. She was in an event with Mayor Streeter a few years ago. I think it was after he was out of office, but he was hosting this event and the ceremony. And he said, now a lot of people are no longer born in New Hampshire. He said, how many of you students were born in New Hampshire? And the only one of the kids who put up their hand was her son.
It's amazing.
You know, second generation, and at that point, he was the only one of all those students who were born in New Hampshire. So the state is changing dramatically, but virtually anybody can get into the New Hampshire House. And that's not, sometimes from my perspective, it's not a good thing, but in most cases it really is, because we learn so much about different cultures, about, you know, different people, and I would put up our legislation that we pass out of the New Hampshire legislature against the legislation that comes out of any state in the nation. You know?
I agree with you, because I'm out in Arizona sometimes, and I bought a house there, and I still keep residence, and I still vote only here. I don't cheat and vote in 3-4 places. And it's just amazing where I am. They have a city hall. I went from a town to a city, and to see the city clerk, you need a security clearance. I went, what? Like, why do you need that? Well, you got to go up to the 3rd floor. I says, the clerk's office should be right here, and you don't need a security clearance for the thing. So they found out I was a state rep and this, that, and the other thing. And so I got to meet with 2 of the town councilors, and the mayor said, would you please come talk with me? I said, sure. And I got in there, and he was listening, you know. And we became great friends. I got some good friends. But there's certain things that people just don't realize. You can't just do something and think it's right. That's the think you know people. And they're working on some things, and it's not bad. And one of the things, like you said, when I became a state rep, I didn't realize how many people well, I'm from New York originally, and you know, yous guys talk funny here. So I just, you know, I felt like I have experience. Like I say, I worked for the Republican whip in the New York State Senate. I worked for his buddy, the ranking Democrat in the New York delegation of congressional leaders. And I had experience. So when I came here and some people were saying things, I said, look, no, you don't know what you're talking. You can't just do that, you know. And it's good because maybe somebody in Chicago, Detroit, New York, whatever, we can bring some knowledge, like you said. Now, if you're out in the middle of, I don't know, a state in the middle of nowhere and you ran for something, you don't have the experience as, how would you say, populated areas. So up here, what I liked about it in New Hampshire was, yeah, there's 400 reps. It's only a lousy $100 a year, and you got to pay taxes. But I look at it, there's probably those that just need a place, something to do. Some would just party, and some get there and say, I'm going to get things done. And results are the main answer. But you meet all kinds of people, and you can work with people that have different experiences from around the country or the world. And being New Hampshire is sort of small, boy, can you get things done here, you know? And I'm really amazed, and I'll tell you the truth, I liked working with Craig Benson when he was governor, even though I only worked for the state. And John Lynch, he's a Democrat, but he did some good things too, you know? And, well, when I did the Veterans Bill, he was all happy about it, and it was good. And people got to understand, when you write legislation, you got to make sure it's done right. Otherwise, you can pass a bill, and it's not right, or like you know, as a former representative, now the speaker, you got to have the right details in there. Otherwise, it messes up everything. Now you wrote it, you had somebody check it and everything, and it may take 2 people out of work and put none to work. You know, you got to watch how the wording is. So it's very good. And I would suggest to anybody that lives in the state of New Hampshire, if you really want to do something, don't be afraid to be a state rep, but do the right thing on behalf of the people that elected you, even the ones that didn't vote for you, because you got to look out for all of them, because this is the United States of America still. So we should do it that way. And I just see too many people being extreme one side or the other and have a thought. And you can't think you know. You got to really get into it. And I'm sure as the speaker, you got lots of bills coming in. How many you got this year? You got over 400?
I think we have on the House side somewhere in the neighborhood of 650. I think the the total between the House and the Senate is approaching 900.
Wow.
Which is actually a pretty light load.
It is light.
I've been in there when we've had a total of 1,500 bills,
Oh, yeah.
which is just crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So we're not in too bad a shape in terms of the number of bills, but and there's certainly a wide variety. The ideas that people are coming up with now are
Ideas.
things that 20, 30 years ago we never would have thought you'd see in legislation. And I don't necessarily mean that in a good way
Right.
in all aspects, but there are some certainly ingenious ideas, and then there are those that I just look at, shake my head, and so do the committees, because we've got a very short session coming up on next Wednesday. Well, it should be short, but people, as you know, some people can take a short session and turn it into a whole day.
Oh, yeah.
But most of the committee reports have coming out as inexpedient to legislate, which means that the bill should die. And most of those are coming out bipartisan, 17 to nothing to kill the bill.
Well, that's
So-
good.
So
Yeah, you just don't get elected into office that you want to put something you believe in or you think you know into legislation. My first year, I didn't even want to put a bill in.
Yeah.
And then the second session, I had Lieutenant Colonel Chris Roberts, a United States Marine, and he's a Marine, and he was good. And he negotiated with me and talked with me. And I said, well, I told him, I don't need to do this, that, or the other thing. He says, okay, but do what you got to do. And he worked with me, and I love the man. And now I think he's in a wheelchair. He is one great human being. So that's all I can say. No matter what party he ever would be in, he'd always get my vote, even though he's not here in this town. But you really got to know what you're doing. And the next year, I learned from the first year how to do things the way they need it done here. And then I put in a bill. And I changed the word from could to shall. And shall means, yes, you shall have this day off if you're a veteran.
Yeah.
Unless, and then one of the other reps, what's her name, Coffey, had said to me, would you think about amending it because you got first responders? I said, Representative, you write it, you give it to me. If I say yes, you did the amendment. And we did.
Yeah.
And Governor Lynch and the Senate, they all fell in love with the bill because it was done pristinely. And in Arizona, I met with a state rep, and I says, do you care about veterans? He says, certainly. I says, well, look at New Hampshire bill such and such and put it in. He says, send it to me. I never heard from him. So I'm up here, so you know me, Jasper. He's going to hear from me. And I'd like to see that let's stop talking about what we want to do, what we will do for veterans, and we don't do it. And one thing I want to say to everybody is don't say thank you for your service. Please, if they wore the uniform of this United States of America and the Armed Forces, I don't care if they served in Brooklyn, New York, or in combat, you have two words for them. The two words are welcome home. And that comes from the Vietnam veteran that it wasn't done until after 1985. So that's something you should look at. Now, I believe you were in the service too?
No, I wasn't.
You weren't?
No, I was not. I was graduated from high school in '77 and
Wow.
went to work in the family business. And I often wished I'd served. My mother was a Korean War veteran.
Oh, really?
Yes.
God bless her. Well, welcome home to her too. That's right.
So I certainly have a lot of respect for veterans, and I have a lot of actually ancestry going way back. Not so much in the last century, but in the century before that. So I have.
So you related to who?
Well, I have a number.
John Hancock or anything?
Well, I'm not. Actually, I have a pretty interesting family ancestry, but I have, I think, what did I have? 3 great-grandfathers who fought in the Civil War.
Wow.
2 of them who ultimately died at a young age as a result of their wounds that they received, and then about a half a dozen great-great-great-great-grandfathers who fought in the Revolution.
Wow.
So I have a deep appreciation for the sacrifices of the veterans of this country going back to the beginning of the
Oh, yeah.
country.
It's amazing that the things that people fought for to have a free nation and all the things, and it's just amazing how some people don't understand it, but then there's those that do. And it is very important. And we just had a lieutenant colonel that just died in the Air National Guard, and she was extremely well, and it was nice. They had a full, beautiful burial funeral for the lady, and it's a shame because she was very, very good, you know. But and General Rendell, who's here from Londonderry, he does an extremely good job, and so does the general under him, the female general. She's very good as well. And we've got some people in the state here that will look out for veterans and not just walk away from them. And there's a lot of issues that are going to happen for veterans. And in Arizona, they had, I don't know how many that died in the Phoenix Veterans Administration Hospital. I'm like, oh my God, are they crazy? And up here, the VA here is good. I'm not just saying it politically or anything, but the VA hospital here is good. When I went to get my VA card a couple of years back, they said, we sent it to you. They sent 3. I said, 3? I never got 1. So then they went and checked, and they found out they didn't send them to me because they said it was a prisoner of war missing in action. I says, what? So I went and I got somebody, came over, and they talked, and they got it done. And because of that, because lots of people, when things happen, they just, they don't care about it. I leave it alone. I don't. And I went up there, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but because I brought it up and they found out I was a prisoner of war, which I was not, I was never in combat, I was in Europe, 12 other veterans got their cards because they had them as prisoners of war in New
Really?
Hampshire. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's people that think they know, and there's the ones that know what they think and get things done properly. So the VA here did a great job, great job.
And you know, the new chairman of the State, Federal, and Veterans Affairs Committee in Concord, who I appointed, is from Hudson. He is a retired lieutenant colonel. He flew, I believe, if the number's right, 265 missions in Nam. He was in a plane that was drawing the fire from the bombers.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a pretty dangerous job. So, you know,
So
some
he
people.
was Air Force?
He was Air Force, and quite an individual. And so he, you know, I appreciate that service and put him in that position
that's
as
good.
chairing that committee. And he's now the representative to the State Veterans Council, and well qualified, and will serve the people of New Hampshire well in those capacities.
Well, that's good, because that was the committee I was on, and we didn't have tons of meetings like some of the other groups, but boy, the people on there, I don't care what their party, they were dedicated, and we cared about the military, state and federal regulations that are a little crazy sometimes, and lots of things got done over there, and it didn't matter who the chair was, but it was all done good, so I'm glad. And when you see him, tell him Frank Emiro said, welcome home, and he'll understand. And, you know, I was a legislative director for the Vietnam Veterans of America in New York. I never served in Vietnam, and they asked me to be a legislative director. I said, but I just came here to support you guys, you know. They call me a Vietnam veteran, which technically, legally you are, but I was never in combat, so I'm out of country, and all the other veterans too. So they had said, you know, we could say era, and that's good too, but you never know, like today. Well, an example, on 9/10, nobody was a veteran, unless they served in a conflict. The minute 9/11 happened, boom, they're veterans, because we're at war. So you never know, and when I was in Europe, we don't know, the cook, an MP like me, or anybody else, a medic, gets orders, 30 days, you're going home for 2 weeks, and then you're going to Vietnam. And you got transferred automatically. And when I was in Europe, people don't know, but, well, in '68, the Russians went into Prague, Czechoslovakia, and my sergeant came up to me and he says, Emiro, tonight, 2 buses MPs are coming in, make sure this, that, and that. I says, where are they going? He says, they're going to the border. I said, Sarge, what are you doing? So he said, what's the matter? I said, and I pointed to my 2 pistols. So he says, the buses come, if they're not canceled, you're on the bus. I said, thank you, Sarge. So what happened, they canceled it, and they put the German border guard on, then the German military, and then the US Army was on standby. And in Europe, I don't care what branch you were, you were on alert like every 4 weeks to 6 weeks with Israel or something, you know, that would happen in the country that the people here never knew. They don't know in Israel, it was every 4 to 6 weeks something was going on. We were on high alert. So it was some strange things that went on. So when you take that oath, even if you're in the National Guard, you don't know where you're going, you know, so you have to.
No, you don't.
Well, you don't have to, but I do, and I'm sure you do as well. We have respect for those people.
Absolutely.
And that's how I look at it. I don't look down on, I may disagree with a Marine, an MP or anything, and just so you know, in Arizona, I endorsed a guy who was a military policeman like me, non-combat, and he became a police officer, and he became a U.S. congressman. I never even knew it. And he was running for governor in Arizona, and he took two years, one term. He lost to the Democrat. Clinton came out and got him out. And then they asked him to run again after. He said, no. So he ran again. He did 2 more terms. He only did 6 terms. And his name is Frank Riggs. He's the one that put the wall from California to Yuma, Arizona. I says, wow, an MP, a cop, a congressman, and he talks about he knows how to end the border, you know, fix the border. This guy knows. But in politics, there's too much PAC money. I'm against that myself. Because a real candidate really doesn't stand a shot. And I don't know who the candidates are going to be for president this year, but I do know someone born in New York, lived in New Jersey, after that came here to Bedford, New Hampshire. He ran in the last primary, and they wouldn't even let him on TV. And in South Carolina, I think the Republican Party wanted $33,000 for his primary. And I think he's running again. His name is Christopher Hill, combat fighter pilot, U.S. Air Force. The second night over Iraq, when they showed all those missiles and everything coming up, one of the aircraft next to him were from Naperville, Illinois, the 2 guys, was vaporized at 700 miles an hour. So that's combat. You do what you got to do. You take it on. You don't know. And for me, I'm sorry, I'm a Republican, but the Republican Party in the Carolinas should have done the right thing by a combat veteran. And I'm just not for the PAC money. And I don't agree with what Feingold and McCain did with the PAC money. I disagree with that. Say you wanted to run for president or me, what's the difference? We have a right. But if you don't have PAC money, nothing gets done right, and you get beat up, and things are said about you that aren't really true. They put a half a sentence in, and I would like to see that change too. But
Well, there certainly is too much money in politics, in my opinion.
Yep.
And that's one of the things I never do is raise money. I'm probably the only person ever elected to speaker any place in modern times that didn't spend a dime to get elected speaker.
Well, that's good.
But,
that's why I like you, because I know who you really are, and I think the people watching will now see who really is Shawn Jasper.
But you know, we have got to get a lot done for the people of the state of New Hampshire. And you know, we used to talk about the New Hampshire advantage, and some still think the New Hampshire advantage is there, but unfortunately our brand is badly damaged, and part of that is the cost of doing business. Our business taxes are too high. It's sort of a shame when we look at the fact that Massachusetts has lower business taxes than we do. Our energy costs are going through the roof. Luckily, if you're on oil this year, at least you're getting a break there. But a big problem, and people need to understand, is that in the next few years, we're going to be in an energy deficit in New England. You know, Vermont Yankees closed down. They're closing down coal plants in Mass, in Connecticut, and we are looking at a deficit in our energy supply in this area. And if they're not able to bring energy in from outside of the region, we're going to be in big trouble. So people talk about Northern Pass, and I agree that we need to be very careful about our environment and the scenic beauty. But I don't think if we go through rolling blackouts in New Hampshire, there's going to be too many people who are going to think that's a higher priority than not having any electricity or heat in their homes in the middle of January.
Right. I fully agree with you, and I used to work on a pipeline before. I worked for the state years ago, and they were bringing power from Canada through Maine, through Newington, into Massachusetts, into Long Island, New York, and they were getting the fuel, well, the electric power, and that New Hampshire, I don't know who it was, the governor, the House, the Senate, whatever it was, said no. And all they had to do, the line was here, was just clamp it and bring it right in. And they could have had it. And people say, oh, you got to dig, it's going to cost $5 billion. No, there's lots of times they put in a sewer line or build a road, and there's a passage there that they take a thing and shoot it right through. You don't even know it's there.
Yeah.
And what you're talking Northern Pass, I agree, but I see it that, well, when I was in office, was that why go put it on a hill that if the trees go or the snow, you can't get up it? Maybe put it on the street and run it underground. Maybe you can do it that way. And it may cost more money, but if you do it through the streets, make it reasonable and save people
Well,
the
and
power.
Public Service is coming out with a new comprehensive plan to address many of those things. But
Good.
we've got to do that. That's only part of the solution.
Right.
We've got to be expanding the gas lines now, and people are, not in my backyard, but the
Right.
reality is right now, we're running in New England something like 60% of our electric grid is off natural gas, but our pipe sizing is not. First of all, it's not capable of handling higher pressure, and second of all, it's too small. So in many cases, we can just do it in the existing right-of-way and just replace a 2-foot pipe with a 4-foot pipe. And we've got to do that because people, right now, the lights are on, the heat's on, it's okay. But the reason that we had such a huge increase in our electric rates this last year, particularly for people who weren't on public service, thankfully, public service isn't relying heavily on gas. They've got buying power from Seabrook, and they've got the Bow coal station. But everybody else's rates went up was because of the lack of capacity for gas, and that was why the electric rates went up like 17% or whatever.
Jeez.
Whatever went up. And so we have got to plan, and that's part of what the legislature needs to do. It's like the New Hampshire retirement system, Frank. 20 odd years ago, I was working on that as a legislator, and we had a huge surplus at that time because our system was young, so more people were still paying into the system
Right.
than we're taking out. That's the time to do the planning. And what we wanted to do then was say, all right, anybody hired after, and let's just say it was July 1st, 1993, had to work 25 years if you were police or fire, do things like that, things that we actually did back in 2011. Couldn't get those changes through because the unions talked to the reps and said, no, we're not touching that. That's, the third rail of politics, so we wouldn't touch it. Now, we waited 20 years till it was absolutely positively broken and we didn't have any choice. And now we have a $4.3 billion shortfall.
Jeez.
It's going to take us, and the towns and cities are doing it, and I just had a briefing today. They're paying the price because for about 15 years, we weren't paying enough into the system as the towns and cities. And now, because we waited so long, it's going to take us 30 years to make up that deficit when we weren't paying. And now we're paying a surplus, an excise, if you will, or an extra to fill that gap. For teachers, the rate of sustainability is we only need to pay in like 2.3% for people going into the system now. But because we got so far behind, we're paying an extra 8% for 30 years.
Wow.
For police, we're paying like 5 point something percent as sustainability, but we're paying an extra 17% for 30 years. For fire, our rate is like 6%, and we're paying an extra 18% for 30 years is the projection right now. Now, some of that'll change. We had a very good year last year and made a 17% return on investment, but this year it's not looking so good. And so we have got to do things planning moving into the future, and that's something we don't do very well. We didn't do it with our retirement system. Right now, we're not doing it with our energy grid. And we need to wake up and say, hey,
Absolutely.
it costs you so much more if you wait until the problem is there staring you in the face. And that's one of the shames of how government tends to react to things. We don't want to deal with a problem as politicians. And,
Right.
And I say that as politicians, I was somebody who was willing to do it, as somebody who I think is representing the people and willing to take the heat. If they don't like what we do, hey, I'm making $100 a year. Vote me out of office.
That's right.
Well, now as
Exactly.
Speaker, I'm making $125.
Wow, you got a raise.
I got a raise. So
That's good.
but there's so few people who are willing to take that risk and stand up and explain it to people. And usually if you explain to people, like People say on the retirement system, well, why don't we, we have a defined benefit plan. Why don't we go to a defined contribution plan? And they think that's, oh, okay, that makes sense. A lot of companies have done that. Companies that have done that were fully funded. They had their liabilities already taken care of because their plans were fully funded. We have that $4.3 billion shortfall in our retirement plan, which means if you want to change the plan and go to a defined contribution plan, do you know what that means?
No.
We would have to bond $4.3 billion to make the switch.
Jeez.
You know what our total bonding for the whole state of New Hampshire, outside of the highway system, but in the is less than $1 billion. So you'd be quadrupling the debt of the state of New Hampshire. We don't have the bonding capacity to do that.
Right.
So we have to fix. We can't totally change the system we're on because there's just not enough money to do that. And it's going to take us, with all that extra, it's going to take us 30 years to fix it.
Wow.
And that's.
So you think you'll have a lot more gray hair?
Yeah. Hopefully I'll still be around.
You will. You will.
But I don't think I'll be in the legislature then.
Well, you never know. You never know.
But this is why we have to just stop fighting with each other. We have to stop calling each other names. We have to say, how do we fix the problem?
Work together.
And Frank, you may not get 100% of what you want. I may not get 100% of what I want. But if we get to the point we want to be,
exactly,
that's what counts.
You're right.
Ronald Reagan had a great quote. I don't care who gets credit for the problem, for solving the problem, as long as we solve the problem. There was something on that. Yeah. And that's what really matters. Don't be looking for the credit. Be looking for the solution. Right.
And I think one of the biggest problems is the PACs, that they don't like you or him or her or them, and they make up these half stories.
Oh, yeah.
And then you got the press doesn't give you the full press the way it's supposed to be sometimes. And then you get a group that's going to make things, they don't like you because you got a mustache, or I don't have one, they don't like me, and the general public doesn't see it that much. And if you watch TV, all you see is commercials, and it's the same thing over and over. You don't even want to watch TV no more, and you're paying all that money to listen to certain things, and how much of it is really the truth? That's why I know I was an elected official, so were you. And you got to deal with it, but it's hard to get the message out to people that have to work hard every day, travel around the country, whatever they got to do to make a living and an income to keep their family secure. And then all of a sudden, they might fall asleep and not even see the TV, or something is said and it's said improperly, or it's read in a newspaper improperly. And you got to work things out, and that's what you say, and I agree. And in my retirement with the state, I got a disability, and I can't take a person off. I put her on. And she married somebody, accused me of cheating, and this, that, and the other thing, and I'm like, what? So I can't take her off my retirement. And that's ludicrous. It's my disability. I got the disability. So that person can get hers, his, and mine. So those are things that people don't know on the outside. And I think in politics, I think we got to stop doing certain things. There's lots of things we need to do that need to be done properly. And let's not just pick a topic of birth control or this, that. No, that's a religious thing. You have your right if you want to believe it. And I think that's where the big issue is. Let's deal with the facts. You're going to have a lot to do. And I think, when I ran, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but when I ran for governor, I had results, not promises, and that's it. And you're the same way, and that's the way we need to do things. And I think the people that are watching this or whatever, they need to understand, whenever you talk to someone that's in elected office, listen to them, but make sure they're going to do what needs to be done for you and your family, and not for foreigners or anything else unless they become American citizens. Let's do the right thing for the people in this country. And people like Shawn, like I say, I worked with him as a state rep. We had differences, but we worked it out. And as Speaker, I think you're going to see a lot in 2 years, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to see a man that's going to kick the bull in the butt, and he's going to get things done. Some people will say things about him, but you can always check with the House and go on the House website and see what's getting done or not. And sometimes people may say, I'm going to make all dollar bills free, And like with legislation, there was a thing I told people, you got to understand, I might vote for something that says, I might vote against something because I can't say I can or can't. If we did a bill and it says, the end of the year, everybody gets $100 back in taxes, free, no problem. Then they'll say, well, Frank, you voted against it. Well, I had to because there was an amendment that came up and said, yes, they get the $100, but in 5 years, they got to pay $20,000 back. So I voted against it. So the only thing I'll ever agree with John Kerry is he voted for it before he voted against it, and people don't understand that. And you've probably got a lot to do.
Well, there is a lot to do, but as I said, there's a lot of great people working with me because pretty much everybody up there just wants to get the job done for the people of the state of New Hampshire. Now, our biggest challenge is going to be the budget. We'll be seeing in a couple weeks what the governor comes out with for a budget, and we know she's got a lot of challenges. The healthcare costs are getting out of control. We saw from Washington, the CBA, Congressional Budget Office, CBO, right, saying that Obamacare now is costing everybody who's on it, it's costing the government $50,000 a year. Now that's absolutely insane.
Absolutely.
So, Obamacare clearly is adding to the deficit, is clearly not working. We could have gone out and bought everybody a $20,000 a year health insurance policy and been far better off.
Absolutely.
And how does anybody think that we're going to be able to sustain $50,000 a year for people who are on, health care? It's crazy. And these are the challenges we face in the budget. But the one thing that we can't do, it'd be nice to say, oh, well, we've got all these wants and all these needs, and we do, is, well, we'll just raise more taxes. Well, who are we going to raise the taxes from?
I know.
The economy has recovered most of the jobs it lost, but they're not the same jobs that were lost. I mean, it's easy to say, you say, all right, well, you had a job that you were working at $60,000 a year. Now you got a new job at $40,000. Oh, good. We're recovered because you got a job. Yeah, right. But you're making, a quarter less than you were.
And how many jobs went to China? People say they buy an American car. I said, what did you get? And they'll say this. I said, no, you go to El Paso, Texas, you watch that American vehicle come right over the line from the border. They're made in Mexico. Some are made in China. There's nothing is really American made. It could be American assembled with parts and pieces, but it's a shame. So all those, we'll pick the automotive industry, all those trucks and cars that are sent overseas, look how many people we put out of work in this country. Even if they took a little bit less, but they make more money, taxes go up.
One of the things there, and I've got to correct my math before your listeners think I can't do simple math. No, I said 60,000 to 40,000, a third less, not a quarter.
Right.
But and I agree with what you're saying about the jobs over in Mexico. And the big thing is we're allowing these factories. In some cases, we've literally pulled a factory down in the United States because it was polluting too much, torn it down, brought it to Mexico, reassembled it, and it's polluting the same amount. Now, wouldn't we have been better off to say, all right, well, we can reduce the pollution here and kept the Americans working? Well, what are we doing? I mean, they're dumping their raw sewage into the waterways, into lagoons, whatever. There's no child labor laws in so many places. And we're saying, yeah, but we're getting the goods cheap. Yeah, but you just put a whole bunch of Americans out of work. And if you said, all right, you want to compete with this China? Here are our labor laws. Here are our pollution laws. You build a factory. You hire workers that are meeting the same standards that we're meeting in America. Now compete. America can't compete when we tie the hands of our industry. And that's what our Congress has done. You look at the trucking from Mexico. Mm-hmm. Oh, they can come across the border with trucks that don't meet our pollution standards, they don't meet our safety standards.
That's right.
And now they're trucking, as long as they're coming from Mexico, they can truck pretty much anywhere in the United States. And we're saying, oh yeah, that's good, fair trade. What? Yeah. How do you even say that? We're constantly tying our own hands. And it's
what you're talking about with the chemicals. I knew somebody in Port Huron, and he was in Afghanistan in the infantry, needed some help with VA, so I helped him with that. And I'm over there at Port Huron, and I'm like, what are all these stacks across the river, the lake, in Canada? And he said, oh, he says, they wanted to put that, whatever that chemical company is in the United States, but Michigan or the United States said no because of all the pollutant.
Yeah.
So now it's in Canada, and what's it doing? It's blowing into Michigan.
Yeah.
So it's like, what? And you can't tell Canada not to put it across the
No.
lake, and it's blowing into Michigan, and it's poisoning the water and everything else. So our cancer level is going up, even though we don't have that business here. And I would think, and I'd have to think I know on this one only, that business or the government would have certain regulations on those fuels and vapors coming into the country that would be a little cleaner or a lot cleaner. And maybe they didn't want to do it, so I don't know. And if they put it on the other side of Michigan, well, maybe up in the north part, it would go into Canada, and it wouldn't come to the United States. But we don't know, and too many people are having cancer problems and issues, and everybody's on medications. Nobody respects the law when driving a car. Even state police, not here, I haven't seen them here yet, and I'm not just saying it because I'm in New Hampshire, but I've been in other states driving back and forth, and they're doing 90 miles an hour and then cut off to get off. I'm like, whoa, nobody is above the law. You're supposed to do the same speed limit, even with those lights and sirens, as the speed limit. And people be in the left lane, doing 50, the right lane, they got to pass them around. No, the left lane is passing only. And people have no respect, and I just don't see, I'm sorry, the country is just going down, down, down. Out in Arizona, I learned from some people there, ISA or ISA, however you want to say it, they're living in our state parks, and this was said by the congressional people there. They're living in our state parks, and the president will not allow the Border Patrol to go get them out of there. But if you and I went in there and we slept overnight, they'd throw us out. There's something wrong here, folks.
Well, there's a lot wrong on a lot of levels, particularly with the federal government, and you know.
Well, what do you think your big issues would be that you can accomplish, or you're going to have problems with in the state of New Hampshire?
Well, obviously, the number one thing that we have to do is pass a budget that we live within our means, and that's going to make a lot of people unhappy. But we have to do that because we just can't, as I said, we can't pull more money out of a fragile economy because things really haven't recovered to where they should be. You know, we've got to reform workers' comp. We have some of the highest rates in the country on workers' comp. That's keeping people from coming in here. We have got to find a way, and it's not short term, it's long term, as I said, with the energy costs. We've got to deal with the energy costs, and we've got to figure out how do we bring more energy in, how do we give the capacity so those prices can come down. Those aren't easy solutions. As Speaker, I don't pretend I have all the solutions, but there are people out within the 400 in the House who do have the solutions.
And you'll knock on their door and say, come in here and sit down.
Well, you know, and that's what I'm doing right now is, you know, you were in the House, Frank, and you know there were people in the House who said, well, I've never been to the Speaker's office, you know. And some people like, oh, if you get called to the Speaker's office, it's a bad thing.
Right.
So I'm doing a lot of outreach right now. I'm having all the vice chairs of all the committees bring their freshmen into my office for a half-hour chat just to exchange ideas, get them to feel comfortable, let them know that they can come and see me. I've done the same thing with the Democratic office. I've said, talk to your ranking members of every committee, have them bring their freshman members in and talk with me. Because I want to get every member of the House who wants to have come into my office and sat and chatted with me for a while, because that's my first priority. We've seen a lot of speakers from both parties over the years who spend a lot of time during the session. They get invited to a conference here or something there. Right off the bat, I got invited, would have been all paid by this organization, to Speakers Conference in Texas. Now, would I like to go to Texas and meet with all the other speakers of the? Sure I would, but how does that help the people in New Hampshire? How does it help the rest of the other 399 representatives? It doesn't.
Well, that's why I always liked you, because you're dedicated, and I have a lot of respect for that.
And so, thank you. And so I've said to everybody, I said, if I get an invitation to go someplace and the House is in session, I'm not going anyplace. You know, maybe if I could go over a weekend or something, but if it involves me leaving Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, I'm not going, because my job is to be there to serve the other 399 representatives. That's the Speaker's job. My job isn't primarily to push an agenda. We had a caucus of the Republican members of the House and said, what are your priorities? And now they built the agenda. They said, here are our priorities. Here are the things we want to accomplish, not what Shawn Jasper wants to accomplish, not what Jack Flanagan, the majority leader, wants to accomplish. What do the Republicans in the House want to accomplish? So we took those ideas, we had to compress them down into a relatively reasonable
Exactly.
a document that's workable, and now we're looking for those ideas in the bills that are coming out. We're working with the members so that their agenda is advanced. I don't really have, a personal agenda other than how do I make the House work as efficiently as it can? How do I make sure that the members are heard and feel that they are a valued part of the legislature? Because that's important. Now, I'm not going to agree with, as I said, I mean, there are some ideas out there that most everybody's looking at and saying they're crazy, because if you're getting a vote of 17 or 20 to nothing out of a committee, that means the Republicans agree that it's crazy, and the Democrats agree. So,
and that's what the committees do. They
Yeah.
hear the testimony and they listen and they make a decision.
and that goes back to what you said about, knowing what you know, thinking what you know, type of thing. The committees are the part of the legislature that does the work. I can think I have a great idea, but I'm going to tell them, and there's going to be 20, 21 people on a committee, and they're going to actually do the work and see if I did know anything or not. And they're not going to be afraid to tell me if I don't know anything.
Right. One of the things I liked about the state of New Hampshire as a rep, in my committee, when I was on, somebody would address us with a testimony, and no matter what party, they'd say to the person, excuse me, and the chairperson would say, okay, ask the question, and you'd ask that person, like, is that your opinion, or do you have actual documentation? Well, excuse me, is that your opinion, or do you have actual documentation? And then they'd start talking, and most of the people would just buzz off because they say they're saying things that are not true, and they want to do something like, I'll give you the biggest law in the United States that's broken every day by everybody, that's in different cities and towns, a four-way stop sign. It's illegal. You can't have a four-way intersection with 4 stop signs. It's against the federal code. Wherever you go in the United States, you'll see them. There was a state rep with me. He worked in Manchester. He worked for the city of Manchester. And he says, people don't know you can't do it. I says, I know, I work for traffic safety in New York. You're exactly right. You cannot have a 4-way stop sign, because if 4 of us are there, who goes first? Nobody. If there's an accident, you can sue the state or the city to put up that sign. Now, they may have amended it, but it's illegal. They put it up because they don't want to put a traffic light there. But you can put 2 yield signs and then 2 stops. But you can't do a 4-way stop. And I says, you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican, and we agree. He says, yeah.
And there's where I'll say the federal government's got no business telling the state of New Hampshire what it can do on its streets that it bought and paid for. And this is where there's federal overreach, because there's so many federal codes, and and this is where state sovereignty is certainly important, and there's got to be something done about federal overreach as well.
Exactly.
Because, all this money that comes in, and frankly, most of the state government is run off of federal monies. That's where the majority of our money comes from, is the feds. But they pull more out of New Hampshire in income taxes than they give back. But then they give it back and say, well, you can only spend it this way, and only if you do this. One thing that most people don't know is that, when the speed limit back in Jimmy Carter days went to 55, that was because the Fed said you have to do this or you're not going to get money. What the state of New Hampshire actually never did was lower the speed limit. We posted it at 55, but the speed limit all those years remained at 70 on the books. And if you knew what was going on and you got stopped and ticketed for 55 on a highway, you could get off from that because the law never changed. We actually, when the Fed said, all right, you can go back, you can go to 65, we actually lowered the speed limit from 70 to 65 when that happened. Now we're in a situation where some sections of the interstate we're back up to 70. Right. And the drinking age. Why did the drinking age go to 21? Went to 21 because the Fed said, if you don't raise it to 21, we're not going to give you federal highway funds.
That's right.
It's blackmail.
Exactly
and
right.
It's our money. It's money they took out of New Hampshire, only willing to give some of it back, And yet that's what we have to put up with instead of just saying, all right, we're going to give a block grant. We don't know New Hampshire. We're in Washington. You know, they don't know what's going on in New Hampshire. If they just said, here's the total amount of money that we're going to allocate to New Hampshire, we're taking out all our expenses to run the military and all the things that the federal government has to do, and now every state's going to get a block grant back, we'd be able to spend that a hell of a lot more efficiently and wisely than we can by Washington saying, well, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, you've got to do... What do they know about the people of New Hampshire? What do they know about the needs of New Hampshire?
Well, that's what the congressional people that are U.S. reps are supposed to do, is represent the people,
Sure.
and they're not even doing that. You shouldn't go with your minority or majority leaders' opinions or whatever, and those are things that I would disagree with. And when I was a rep, I told one of the federal employees for Federal Highway, I said, you know, I got a question. I says, in the state of New York on Interstate 84, you can do 55 in this area, then once you pass Poughkeepsie and go over the bridge, you go, it becomes 65. He says, well, actually, you can do 70. I says, really? So he says, it's a federal highway, which it is. Interstate highways are military highways. They're made by Eisenhower and everything else so that if we had to land troops or supplies, within so many miles, there has to be a mile straightaway, no underpasses, overpasses, that we can land an aircraft. And there's not supposed to be any toll booths on it, but Bill Clinton allowed them to keep it, to go into the state. All the toll booths should be off. And those are the games, like you say, the federal government is controlling that. And it's just sickening. So he said to me, you can do 70 miles an hour. If they give you a ticket, you go to court, they're wrong. I'm like, wow. And it's all over the United. If it's a U.S. highway that's an interstate, then you can do 70 miles an hour. And I think it's Texas now. I think it went up to 85 or something. And if you're going from El Paso to Fort Worth, there's nothing there anyway, you know. So you want to get across. But it's just lots of people don't understand regulations. They don't understand the issues. They don't know the difference between state, county, city, federal. And that's why I'm not here to pat my back with you, because I'm not getting a raise or anything else. But I appreciate you being the Speaker of the House, that you understand things. You've been there long enough. You dealt with lots of issues. And now you're going to deal with more. But if you don't know the answer, give me this book, give me this person, come here, talk to me, sit to me, and then you work it out. And it doesn't matter what political party. You got to do the right thing on behalf of the people that elected you. And for you as the Speaker, you're going to, yeah, you got your district, but you also have the entire state now. So I'm proud that you're the Speaker, and these people that made up stories about you, I mean, like, stop. Let's get it right. You can't do just something you want done this way or this way.
And again, I appreciate that, and I'm accessible. My email is on the website, the General Court website. People can and do send me emails asking me questions, giving me their opinions, and I try to get back to everybody who actually has a question for me. You know, a lot of people just send in comments, and I appreciate those, and I read those emails, but I'm not necessarily going to get back to people.
Is it all right? Maybe we can add it to this at the end of the program?
Sure.
All right, well, we'll be glad to do that. And I think you can view this, we only have a few seconds left here, but you can view this on internet and everything else. And again, this is your State House Representative Speaker, Shawn Jasper, and you heard what he had to say. You know he's real, and if you have a question, he said you can come knock on his door or whatever. If he's got time, he'll be glad to sit down with you. Otherwise, he'll send somebody to speak to you. So give me a couple of seconds. We got less than over a minute, but go ahead. You address the people,
Well,
Mr. Speaker.
you know, I think that the most important thing is to educate yourselves before you vote. That it's really important that you know who you're voting for and what they stand for, not just listening to the ads. It should take time, and it should take some effort to vote and to get it right. You're going to need to do some work if we want to change the way this country is headed and the state is headed at times. It takes effort. I mean, I applaud the people of Londonderry. You know, you've sent us some very good representatives who work very, very hard, and that's good. But, you know, we need to go beyond that. We need it at the local levels. We need it at the federal levels, and people just need to get out there. They need to get involved. You need to do this for your future and for the future of your children and grandchildren. We have a responsibility. I mean, as was said many years ago, democracy is the worst form of government except for all others. And the reason that it can be the worst form of government is because if we're not careful about who we elect and who we send to represent us, then we can end up with a real disaster. And frankly, with a federal deficit of the magnitude we have, we're headed there.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you. And I know the people will be watching you, and they're going to be proud of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
People, thank you for letting me be frankly speaking to you. Thank you.